everything. There isn't anything. Willie, come on out. Here we go. Okay, next one. She is a perpetual child. And again, there isn't anything she has not voiced. And she also specializes in accents. Let's have Katie Leigh. Come on out.
I thought you said she was an impetuous child.
Oh, like a perpetual child.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
I know about that.
Okay, I'm going to get it started by asking a few questions.
Sure.
And then you guys are stand up, raise your hand, whatever, and you guys can ask a question. Now, those of you that are in the back, can you hear us okay?
Is this on?
I think so. Oh, here we
They
go.
are on. All right.
Yeah.
So we'll get closer. And if you want, there's plenty of room to move up closer. We can have more of an intimate
I'm
friends
sorry
kind of.
here.
Yeah, an intimate
I
friends.
bet you sat this way in school too, didn't you? Church, school, back row.
Okay, well, I'm going to ask you the question, have either of you ever played D&D since you do the animated series?
You go first. Ladies first. Not for a second.
Okay.
But I will say this, my daughter plays D&D.
Okay.
And to this day, and she's 30, 28.
Yeah. Do you ever observe, sit in on it?
What's that?
Do you ever sit in on some of her sessions?
No, that would be intimidating. For anyone else who wanted to play the ranger. Exactly. But you know what I find really fascinating about Dungeons and Dragons, and even today, is that there are people who, like on Twitter, I had people that knew more about my character, more about the game, more about the, I mean, they knew facts about the show that I didn't know. I mean, people that worked on it, the engineers, I mean, they really, and all these years later to be a part of something that's had that big an impact is just super humbling.
You know, well, until the internet, when this thing, the internet got invented, and then I found these groups. And the first thing I found, I guess it was the internet, was people who were still writing scripts for the show. Like,
Yeah.
maybe some of you are part of those groups, and I'm like, what? We ended, but they're writing scripts and wanting, and just continuing. I mean, there's such the devotion to the, I guess we call it the franchise.
Franchise of the show.
Yeah, of the show. I was shocked that there were, because we don't know, when we did this, a lot of y'all were little. Now you're telling us,
even.
Yeah, and so, we don't, and then this stuff happens, and it grows, and we're continuing on doing other things, and
I actually, somebody came up and I've seen several original works of art for Dungeons and Dragons that have been presented to us throughout the weekend. And whenever I do any kind of a con, it's remarkable to me what you will see. I mean, whether it's Dungeons and Dragons or 8 is Enough or any of the other shows, you have to remember when we do the show, especially and action figures and toys and all of these things that we never even knew existed. So when you bring that stuff to us, I was telling one of the guys at the table today, I am shocked. I had no idea how many versions of the Ranger there was out there, or how prominent the Ranger shows up in pictures, or I just had no clue as to what that was. And when Katie brought some bootleg action figures from a different country, and these things, it's fascinating to me, and I think it's more fun for us than it is for you to come to the table, because you bring things. I'm like, whoa, check that out! How do I get one of these? It's really cool.
Well, actually, I have a question, because just to follow up, Maureen in the audience says those figures came from a game called Fantasy 4?
Fantasy 4.
Tree Forest?
Fantasy Forest.
Is it you who told me that? So, is it true?
They're real. Yeah, I can show you a picture of them.
So there's some game called Fantasy Forest that made those characters that...
Yeah, it was a younger version of Dungeons and Dragons that TSR tried to, because I think there was issue with parents didn't think Dungeons and Dragons in the 80s was,
Yeah, I lived through
It was
that.
demonic.
And honestly, were any of you church people during Dungeons and Dragons
There've been
time?
church people for over 2,000
No,
years.
during the Dungeons, because that's when I really came to faith, and I almost quit voice acting because of it. Because there was this book called Turmoil in the Toy Box that this guy wrote, and it was about how demonic everything was, and here I was, a believer, Christian, and working on Dungeons and Dragons, and I didn't know what I should do. I was having a little crisis, but I stuck with it anyway, and it turned out okay. I know, and then so many people I meet play the game. Back to your, let's finish this playing the game question, who weren't allowed to as children, who play it now.
I
And
think ultimately that was the reason that the networks pulled the show.
I bet
That's
it
why
was.
CBS pulled the show, was because there was, at that time too, at the beginning of the 80s, there were a lot of things that were going on where, police forces were being trained in satanic rituals, and there was a book called, I think, something Caroline, where it was actually a regressed memory memoir of someone who claims that the psychologist had pulled out these regressed memories of her being satanically tortured throughout her childhood, and that these satanic groups were everywhere, and they were in underground, and police forces were actually having these people train them on how to spot satanic ritual and involvement.
And there were some people who died or were injured playing Dungeons and Dragons theoretically.
yeah,
Not
it's-
watching the show.
So a lot of it was actual. That the book turned out to be complete hogwash, and these people had made it all up.
Oh, man.
And then there were
Don't
some
believe
kids.
everything you read, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and I don't think the kids that were injured, they played Dungeons and Dragons, but I don't think that was the actual cause of whatever had happened. We've had
Many of those instances were drug related.
Yeah, there you go. So I say we start the show again.
Yeah.
Let's
Let's start over and get those kids home eventually.
I had one gentleman came up and he said, "You traumatized me throughout my entire childhood." I said, "Why?" He goes, "Because they never got home.
Yeah, he said the same thing to me.
They never made it. They were still lost somewhere."
I'm like, I don't write it, I just read it.
Anybody have any questions? Okay, we have one here.
Talking about how everything is so demonic and satanic, what was y'all's first feelings when you actually started reading the stuff about it and how untrue it was?
You mean about the negative publicity? So the question was with all of the negative publicity around Dungeons and Dragons at the time, how did we feel about that, knowing that it wasn't true? So accurately stated. Really bummed out, because we knew it as this group of really skilled, wonderful, funny people. Hank Saroyan, the writer, producer, director, he also created the Muppet Babies, and he's the most wonderful, lovely, caring, funny man that you would want. And Katie was wonderful, and Donnie was great. We would get together once a week, and we would laugh and laugh and laugh and have a great time. And then to have something so negative ascribed to what we were creating was, for me, it was devastating.
It was confusing, and I never want to be a part of anything that hurts anybody. So, and I didn't know if it's true or not. I mean, I didn't think our show was bad, but if people see what they're looking for. So if you're looking for something bad, evil, something to be scared about, you'll find it. If you're looking for something to find the good in stuff, I think you'll find that.
I'll never forget, we were, at the same time that we were doing Dungeons and Dragons, I was also living in Connecticut and traveling into the city and doing a soap opera called The Edge of Night.
I had no idea he had this other life. I thought he lived, nearby, came to work like the rest of us, and apparently he was like lassoing cows and building empires and TV, on soap operas.
So I used to do the show from a phone booth in Grand Central Station in New York City.
No way.
Yeah, I literally, when I wasn't at the sessions with you guys, I would make up a time, and I used to take the 6:04 every morning from Westport, Connecticut into the city. I would do the soap opera. I'd usually finish around 3. Then I'd go to Grand Central Station, and I would get in the phone booth, and I would do my lines over the phone for Hank Saroyan and everybody else, so they could animate.
Where there was a scratch track.
Yeah, it
not
was a
the
scratch
real-
track.
Okay, yeah.
They would animate, and then when I'd finally have an opportunity to hit studio, I'd reproduce it. And they have somewhere, there are dozens of recordings of me in a phone booth because people used to get mad. I'd be in there for like over an hour, right? And you hear this, "Hey lady, I'm doing a television show in here." I did one from Barcelona.
Why did you have a phone in an office?
No, it was they had phone booths back in the day.
You were Grand Central Station, where's Edge of Night? It must have been at a TV studio.
That was at the state, yeah, but we didn't have phones
You
in our
couldn't
dressing
use
room.
their phone?
No, we didn't have phones in the dressing room now. So I went,
Can you-
and I wanted to.
That's not crazy, like everybody's got a phone now.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, so, yeah. You could hear Hank Saroyan in the background just dying.
I can hear it.
Just
I can
dying.
hear it.
Hey, I'm trying to do a television show in a phone booth.
He does this funny kind of high-pitched laugh, like,
Yeah, he does. He does. Sweetest man on earth. Great memories from that show, right?
and that's where, some of you have seen me crocheting, but Tanya, who played Diana, she was an amazing knitter.
That's right.
She used to buy this really expensive yarn. She was really good, and she'd make commissioned sweaters. And before she was on our show, I don't think she ever did any voice work. I think she was a wrestler or boxer or something, because she would go out, a weightlifter. And after it was over, she disappeared. I don't know what.
Do you ever know what happened to her?
No, I always try to find her,
And
but
then-
she was an incredible knitter. She'd sell her sweaters in the 80s for $200 to people, yeah.
And then the kid Bobby that played Bobby,
Yeah, that's Teddy, that's our producer's son.
our producer's son.
He's a
yeah.
dentist. I think he became a
He
dentist.
was a CBS producer, and he was on, and the poor kid, Dad wanted him to do this really bad, because the kid clearly didn't want to be there, and he took forever.
Well, that's why we didn't record with him. They would bring him in separately.
We did
Hank could
twice.
Coax, yeah.
We did
that's all it
twice,
took.
and we had great overtime pay those days, because it was just painful, that poor kid, and then after that, they did them all alone.
So-
And actually, I saw it a couple of times, because I came in to revoice
yeah.
the scratch, yeah.
So were you guys recording in the studio together
Yeah.
or individually?
Together, unless he was in a phone booth.
In Barcelona.
Barcelona, yeah.
But it was one of the fun things that,
Because he was a huge TV star. Well, Adam too. We were
Yeah,
lucky to
Adam-
have you guys.
yeah, Adam Rich, he was on It Is Enough with us, and the thing that I think is so wonderful about doing voice work when you get the chance to work with the whole cast, and we used to do that at Hanna-Barbera as well. I did a show called Wait Till Your Father Gets Home. And Tom Bosley
That was a
and
good one.
Frank Byrne and Joni Gerber and Don Adams, and it was really, it's unusual to have that sort of lineup of microphones and people and go out there and play the thing like a radio show. It really was probably the closest thing I would ever experience to doing old radio. Because it was just phenomenal, because we would make ourselves laugh all the time.
We had 8-hour sessions back then, before we had this strike in the 80s. But it used to be our sessions were 8 hours, so we would be there a long time. I think he's a little bit lying about the overtime pay. I don't think we ever went over 8 hours. Maybe we did.
I know lots of
Maybe we
overtime.
did.
Go back here.
But now we record in 4 hours. That's the limit
Yeah.
for an animated session.
Yeah, I have not done an animated session in a long time, so.
I want to get
Probably
you
not
on, I want to
six.
get you on Odyssey. Yeah.
I don't know if they do honestly.
Yeah.
Okay, we had another question here.
Yeah, since you guys haven't ever played the game,
Uh-huh.
when they got you or convinced you to do this, did they give you any background about what it was and what this series was trying to emulate, game-wise?
As I recall, I knew there was a game, we didn't, but they said it's going to be different. It's based on the game, but it's not the game. You don't have to know how to play. These are the characters we created.
Right.
This is how we want you to do it, and it's...
And it's pretty much relying for me, no, not at all. I mean, I knew that there was a game, that a game was being created, and this would be the show that...
Right.
And I remember we had several different openings to the show, and some that were really cool, but they came back and nixed them because it didn't look anything like the game, and they were there really to sell toys, right? And so I never had any of that background at all. And for us, we were relying on the director and the producer to tell us what was happening in the scene and what it was going to look like, and whether or not we should give more voice or more emotion or pull it back, and so there was a lot. You really do depend on your director.
I think it was more incumbent on the writers to understand how to represent the game than for us as actors.
Right.
Yeah, good point.
The producers to, and based on their vision of what they wanted the show to be like. I mean, it truly was a lot darker than anything else on TV, I think, at the time. I meant dark, like serious and scary and dangerous, and, that sort of, it wasn't, Mighty Mouse.
Yeah, no, I don't know if I think you're right. I think maybe He-Man was kind of what Skeletor was sort of like,
yeah.
That was pretty dark, but we literally lived in a world that was continuously dark.
And plus, we don't really see it till it's made.
Right.
So we know what we're doing in our scenes, and it's a description on paper, right? But, you don't know until the final thing is made what it actually looks like.
Yeah.
It's just always a surprise when you're working on a cartoon, because we do the voices first and then they animate to it. And then they might make changes and bring it back for pickups, and, they might change the script still. They might change the artwork still.
Or replace the character altogether.
Or fire you, yeah.
An awful lot of accents. How many accents?
I've done, well, not in Dungeons and Dragons, but, I don't know, what I do is, if somebody's looking for an accent, I'll do a little research and see if I can, do voice matching. I've done a lot of voice matching. Some of you have come to my booth, discovered that I did the voice of the Maharaja in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, and that was like voice matching him. And people say, well, I'm a mimic, but I'm not a impersonator where I imitate famous people. I'll match kids' voices on stage, or somebody, if you're doing ADR post-production, you might have to match something. I do not do Boston. I can't have a real hard time with that. The New England accent, that's not something I do. But Hispanic, I do a lot of Latino characters, I guess, from growing up in California. I don't know if anybody ever watched Animalia. Did anybody see Animalia on PBS? No, great show though. You should watch it. She has a, sort of a Hispanic accent, and I do a lot of boy voices. I do British, and I've done Swedish and stuff, Italian.
So any advice for aspiring actors? Because I know some of these people play D&D and their characters may have an accent. Any advice for them on how to pull off an accent and playing their characters?
There's a great lady who teaches accents on YouTube. just look up how to do a whatever accent, and I can't think of her name. She has brown hair, and she demonstrates where to place your tongue.
Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen that. She's quite good, actually.
Yeah, so there's, you can find anything on the internet now.
Amazing thing, isn't it?
Yeah, so I say go check it out, see, try to do that. And, so many people also come on YouTube and they'll say, I'm from New Zealand, and this is how we say blah, blah, blah. Yeah, so you can just listen to it. It's all out there.
Yeah, okay.
Don't call me.
Okay, Willie, you went from being actor to writer, producer, director, screenwriter. How'd you do that? What inspired
Desperation, really. I think there's a point where, with anybody that's acting, that wants to create the way that they want to create without being told no. And I jokingly say, but it's only half a joke, I don't like to be told what to do, and I don't like the word no. And so when you spend your life doing, I'm in my 50th year in this business as of this year. You spend your life having other people tell you what to do and what you can't do and what you should do and what you shouldn't do. And then I think all of us have looked at television or a film or anything else and say, well, I could have written that, but you didn't. And so the challenge became, how do I continue to do what it is that I love to do and know how to do and move forward? And then really the way that it actually happened was I just was lying my arse off when somebody asked me, they came to me and they had a show in beginning of 1990, we were going through, or 89, 90, we were going through a writer's strike, and we just finished a show that I had done called Charles in Charge. And I lived in Newport Beach, California, and I would run my boat around the harbor, and I'd just fish every day. That's what I was doing. Then I'd pull in for fuel. And these guys at the fuel dock came up and said, hey, we run a marlin tournament in Cabo San Lucas, Mexico, and we're having our 10th anniversary, and we want to do a sports special about the 10th year anniversary. It's the richest marlin tournament in the world. And we have teams come from all over the world to participate in this tournament. And we're going to do this television show, and we were thinking, maybe you could host it. I was saying, well, this is great, because there's no work right now. There's a writer's strike, and and I love to fish, and yeah, that'd be awesome. And I said, great, yeah, sure, I could do that for you. And they said, well, there's just one catch, we can't pay you. And I was like, oh, okay, it's going to be like 5 free days in Mexico. Why not? I'll go do that, any day. And about 2 weeks later, I came back and they said, we're trying to do this show about our marlin tournament, and we don't have anybody to write or produce or direct this thing. Do you know anybody who could do it? And I went, I can do it. But I had never written, produced, or directed anything in my life. And so they said, well, great, there's just one catch. And I said, well, don't tell me, let me guess. No wonder you can't find anybody to do it. And they said, right, we can't pay you. And I said, okay, yeah, great, I'll be happy to do it. But I always had lots and lots of ideas of how you could do things. And with that particular show, it turned out great. The ending turned out great because I love to fish. And I had fished all over the world looking for some form of billfish. And I caught tuna and wahoo and all these different things. But never caught a billfish, never caught a marlin. I fished Guam, Palau, Australia, all over, never got one. And I said, so why don't, because fishing shows are usually pretty boring, why don't I do this the way George Plimpton might have done it, which is to actually enter the tournament. And then they can see the tournament through a contestant's eyes, and they're like, well, that's great. And I said, and to up the ante, I'll make an on-camera bet that not only will I catch my first marlin, but I'll win the tournament. And if I don't win the tournament, I'll dress up in drag and sing My Way at the awards banquet. Because I figured people would want to see if I would catch a fish, but then they're really staying tuned to watch me make a jerk out of myself by dressing up like a girl. And they said, you're on. So we made that on-camera bet. And then once I showed up at the tournament, I mean, every time I turned around, I was trying to do my little host thing, and people were snapping bras at me, and, all kinds of things, getting ready for me to lose. So on the first day of the tournament, I went out, we got 2 fish, one that was 333 pounds, and one that was just over 200 pounds, and we were in first place.
Wow.
And I was like, God, this is great, this is, it's going on, we're doing all this other stuff. And the next day we went out, 3-day tournament, and we got like zippity doodah, like nothing. And then mathematically out of the tournament. So the third day, which was Saturday, I'm standing on the back, everybody's got these 56-foot Hatteras, so I got this little 26-foot blackfin, and I'm standing on the stern of the boat, and I turned to my crew and I said, watch this. I went, God, I need a big fish, and I need one now. Whack! About 10 minutes later, we got bit, and I fought that fish for 21 and a half hours and won the tournament. Maybe one of the greatest shows. So it worked out, right? And that was the start of my business.
What was the catch?
457-pound black marlin.
Wow. But I just want to say for those, just to bring it to those who want to do stuff, what he's saying about, just saying you can do it and trying things and
Yes.
you've got to have that mentality. A couple of years ago, I thought, kind of like you, I want to direct. I really want to direct. And everybody calls me for casting suggestions because I meet people all over, voice actors all over the country and the world, and I know people. So they'll ask me for suggestions. I want to do this, and I'm good at it, so I just started putting on my website, casting director, voice director, and I just finished casting my first animated show.
Exciting one.
It's going to be really cool. And directing, if you on YouTube Kids, there's a show called Chi-Chi Love, and that was an original. And first they gave me a dubbing show to do, and then and kind of like you just decide, okay, I am this. I don't have the job yet. And something told me to go meet these guys at a studio, and just met them up, and they're a dubbing studio. And he said, but we're going to be doing some original animation. I said, oh. And I said, who's going to be directing for you? And he said, you are. I met him like in 5 minutes. He goes, you are. I said, okay, fine, just call me when it comes.
And it's scary.
Yeah. It's like, what am I doing? I didn't know how to do, there was the way they do things. To Mark, there's no assistant or anything, and just... But what I liked about directing is kind of what you said, because I get to play all the parts kind of without losing my voice. Like I get to tell other people what to do, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I think that what I love about what Katie's saying too is that none of us really know what we're doing.
Until you do it.
None of us really do until you do it. And it's the pressure of having to do it, I think, that makes us better at it. And I don't know that pressure really ever goes away, because we're performers. We still, this is what we want, right? And I still find, and I've written and produced and direct thousands of hours of television and different things now, and I do a lot of work with Hallmark right now. And I've just... Even when I sit down to start another Hallmark project or a Hallmark script or anything like that, I'm scared to death that I'm not going to be able to pull it off every single time. But you say yes anyway, because it's like, well, what do you have to. Like you shoot yourself if you don't, you have to do it. So if you want to get started, we were having this conversation earlier. If you want to get started and you want to get into the business, the best thing to do is just move forward. Do it. Do it over and over and over.
And we have the benefit of, and I do think it's a benefit of not having regular, steady work for our whole lives, pretty much. Every day, I like to say, we get fired. The job's over.
Yeah.
We're done. There's no more work. So
But that,
creates a different kind of faith and existence. I mean, even when you are hired, you don't know if they're going to replace you.
oh yeah.
There's no guarantees in our business.
And you have tools that are so readily available to you today, whether it's YouTube or whether it's in social media, or, you want to be an animator, and we were talking about voice, get GarageBand, do a scratch vocal or do one that you think, animate to it, realize where you need to change the voice, reanimate to it, get all of that done. Well, you're also becoming a director and a producer, aren't you? Mm-hmm. And then you put it on TikTok for 15 seconds, put it on Instagram, start building a following, and eventually somebody's going to see it and say, hey, let's talk about doing something professionally. Let's move here, let's move there.
It's a snowball, and sometimes it's really fast, and sometimes it's really slow, and sometimes it collects dirt clods and grass, and sometimes it's clean and beautiful, but,
And you know where you get if you don't try it?
nowhere.
That's certain. You've got a definite answer there. I have people come up to me all the time, and they want to know what advice is to get started in the business and what to do, and I'm 60 now, and I'm looking back and I'm going, it's so difficult for a lot of people, but I would never tell any. My parents told me, I came from a family of educators, college professors, and they didn't want me to have anything to do with acting. They were like, absolutely not. You're never going to get anywhere. You're never going to get an education. So they were half right. And yet, it goes back to what I was saying about Lucille Ball. I never allowed myself to not believe that it couldn't happen. And I just kept doing it. And I had plenty of people after a while, when you lose that job, that would say, it's okay to have your career end right now, Willie. You've had a wonderful career. There's no shame in ending it, but I didn't feel like it was done. And so just keep doing it, and don't ever give in, because you will regret not having done it more than you would doing it and maybe not achieving what you were hoping to achieve, right?
People always ask, when did you know you wanted to be a voice actor, right? When the check cleared.
Right? And even then you weren't sure. There's always that little bit of, was that real?
Yeah, there was another question over here. Yes.
I have more, but people here have theirs.
I don't think, did he come to the studio once?
Who?
Gary Gygax, who created
No.
the show. I have a feeling we did, but we're so clueless. Like, no, really, it sounds terrible. Now looking back at my life, I think all the people I didn't pay attention to that I wish I had, because we're on one side of the glass. And back then, on the other side, you had network people, producers, what do they call the ones who check, how, they don't have it anymore, standards and practices.
Oh, yeah.
They don't have that.
Well, they have it, they just don't follow it.
I don't know. They'd have somebody there, they'd have the secretary, the director, and people come and go, and you're just focused on, doing your stuff, and they might introduce themselves, but maybe they just showed up once, so you don't really get, until the history. If you live long enough, like us, and there's this whole thing I wish I paid attention to.
But also,
where's the donuts?
But you're not really invited to pay attention to that either.
That's
So
true.
remember, when you walk into the studio, time is money. They've got an engineer that they're paying. They're paying for the room. They're paying for the mics. They're paying for... And so your job as a professional is to go in and do exactly what they need in as little time as possible. And that is the focus. So all of those other people behind the glass are not necessarily your friend. They're doing this to make sure that you're staying on time and on budget. And so to be able to mix a little bit of the enjoyment of it and have a good time on those days is not, you're never really invited to understand and to meet and to know.
And I think
guys
it
are
would
busy.
make you self-conscious knowing who everybody was.
Yeah.
It's kind of better not to know. If somebody said, oh, there's the president of CBS, you'd be like, oh.
Now, if Stan Lee were sitting behind a glass, you'd have to do something.
Yeah, I have another question. Sure, some people may find this unusual, but if you could spend 24 hours alone in a room with somebody, real, fictional, dead or alive, what would you do together? And who would it be and what would you do together? I told you I was going to give you a challenging question, Molly. We got 5. We have 5 minutes. I'd like an answer from both of you.
You had 24 hours in a room, alone, fictional or non-fictional,
Dead or alive?
dead or alive.
PG-13.
Well, it's up to them to decide whether it's G or whatever.
Just a single person?
Just one person.
That lets out the Dallas Cowboys.
It's hard to pick one person, but I think, I'm just going to throw this out here, I'm sure there's a bunch of answers. Maybe either Carol Burnett or Lily Tomlin, and I would cook.
Awesome, we'd have dinner.
Just, because you can talk and cook, and if you're just staring at each other, that would be awkward.
Yeah, especially for 24 hours.
This is going to sound really cheesy, but I would just be with my wife.
Excellent. There's no wrong answer.
I mean, there's no person on this planet I'd rather spend time with, real or living or anything else, so.
Both are excellent answers. See, we get to learn something about them by asking these kind of questions.
Or go back in time with our kids when they were little.
Nah.
Between a mother and a father, right?
No.
Any last call on questions?
Yes.
Here we go, one right up here in front.
I have some questions from the Dungeons and Dragons fan page on
Oh,
Facebook.
yeah, she does. Does she use a microphone?
Here.
So, however you like to.
Or go.
Okay, here we go. Ready?
You choose one.
Go.
Okay.
I would ask them if they knew the homonymous role-playing game before. No, we already answered that. If they were in any role-playing game, or if they got to know Gary Guy. No. I would also ask if you keep any gifts in relation to the series or any funny anecdote during the recording. Well, no, this isn't funny. So, no.
She was going to tell you what she really thought of me. This was were we all in the recording room together? This is from Ryan, and we addressed that. The answer is mostly. And did they record at separate times? Only when in Barcelona. And did they ever ad-lib anything, or did they stick to the script? I think we primarily stuck with the script, but there were times where they asked us to ad-lib. Usually when we were falling.
Yeah, I mean, make up that kind of stuff, yeah. And as a director and voiceover coach, I always tell people, writers don't want to hear you rewrite the words they've labored over forever, but it's up to you to interpret the script. Like, just as I was reading this, the pauses, the breaths, the vocal things that you do to sort of
If you're tugging on
decorate.
something, remembering to...
Decorate the dialogue. I just came up with a neat expression.
That's a great...
I never said that before. Decorate the dialogue. Yeah, that's
It's recorded now.
That's the name of your book.
okay. Yes.
Promotion there.
That's your website for being a casting director and director for all of these pieces. Decorate the dialogue. It's
Might be. I'll
fantastic.
have to think about that.
Get that domain name now.
Yeah.
Did you write a book?
Yes.
Can you tell
Yes,
us?
yeah. I wrote a book with my friend based on our radio show Adventures in Odyssey called Adventures in Oddity, and we recorded that. And I'm working on the second edition of that one's supposed to come out, but also I am writing a book about my life, but it's not, hopefully next year. And maybe it'll be called Decorate the
Decorate the
Dialogue.
Dialogue is a great title.
But it probably won't be that.
She's married to something else, and then the editor will get a hold of it and they'll change it to something. She goes, oh no, I'd rather have it.
It's hard, writing, and that's why I admire him so much, just learning. I haven't seen Willie in 25 years, 150 years, something like that. And, writers, I just appreciate them so much. I mean, first of all, I wouldn't have anything to say without them, and it just takes so much work and thought. Like, I can write a book, but my way of talking, it's just like, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened. But to make it compelling, you have to really be vulnerable and emotional, and to, draw people in. Like even your idea about when you were doing the Marlon show, putting yourself in it, putting something at stake. That's important. So I'm learning how to.
There's nothing more terrifying than a blank screen.
Well, a screaming child.
Both.
Well, that's
It's a toss-up. I don't know.
Well, that's all the time we have, and I'm glad you guys came out. Hope you learned something about both Willie and Katie. And we'll see you out in Pensacon.
If you have more questions about Dungeons and Dragons, come to our table and we'll try to give you some real
Yeah,
genuine
come to check out the
answers.
celebrity room.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. See you next, right here at PLT main stage at 5:15 for voice acting theater.
Oh yeah, that's gonna be fun.
Yeah, Katie will be in that.